Now, I want us to re-examine in another way and see how humans are part of these symbiotic relationships with all of the species that we've been discussing. And with the olive in particular, the symbiotic relationship between cultivation of the tree and the cultivation of the people, and its impact on civilization and the impact of civilization on its spread, and how we've mutually benefited each other. And this is one of those important things around how civilization, as a keystone species, olive is one of them, and how it helped move civilization forward. There's a saying, and I mentioned this before, that the quote from Fukuoka is that the purpose of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation of human beings. And that is something that we really see coming forward with the olive tree. It's a symbiotic relationship, this mutualistic thing between humans and a tree. And so if we examine this human plant symbiosis, then we also have to examine how we can mutually affect each other. And so, for example, we've mentioned just what's happening with deforestation in the Amazon and how hundreds of thousands of acres are being burned in order to push indigenous tribals back so that this land can be used by larger conglomerates for extractive purposes. Or how, for example, the olive tree in its native regions are being systematically burned down in order to push the inhabitants out. Since 1967, 800,000 olive trees have been burned in the West Bank. And that has been purposeful. The symbology of a tree, in the same way that the buffalo was used to eliminate the Native Americans, by eliminating their symbolic, but also their main food source or their main tree, you can also negatively impact the culture. So it can be both ways. And so we also have to see its use in these areas as well. And to remove the trees is to remove the people. And to help the people is to help the trees. And to help the trees is to help the people. This symbiotic union, we cannot be separated. We've always been an element. And so to recap on some of this and some of the things that we've discussed throughout this course are these symbiotic relationships. And some of the other terminology that we discussed were keystone species, pioneer species, like the birch tree, the climax species, like these oak trees, or the emergent species, like the ceiba tree, and the mother trees, these trees that help give life to the surrounding seedlings and can help move information as well as pump vital sugars and water into the seedlings and help kind of regulate the species around them. And then we also discussed the intelligence of trees, their ability to communicate transspecially and interspecially with things like pheromones. And we talked about the coevolution of how they can shape each other's look and color, and how a bee will emulate the shape of a type of orchid, and how the leaves of a tree can be mimicked by a species of butterfly. And so this coevolution. But then we see within all of that, there's this layering of myth and culture and science, and this is all interwoven into this tree. But then from that, all of human technology and biomimicry, we see as a source for inspiration, whether it's art or invention. And from all of that is how civilization is created, both from the building of boats, as we examined with the birch boats across the North American range during the fur trade, or the massive Viking ships, or the civilizations like the Romans and Greeks. All of this stemming from these trees that we have to give back to and have a relationship with. And we cannot forget that relationship, and that relationship with the soil, the air, the water, and the humans. This is all interconnected. And that interconnectedness is that sacred agreement that we've been discussing this whole time. And that is something that I really want us to walk away with from this course. And one of my favorite quotes from a man named Aldo Leopold, who wrote a book called the Sand County Almanac. He's just an observer and a naturalist. And he wrote, "The oldest task in human history is to live on a piece of land without spoiling it." And that is one of our greatest tasks as humans.